Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network, and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke. Tonight, I'm joined by my co-host, Mika Burrell. Mika, how are we doing?
Doing all right. How are you, Phil?
Good. You know, it's always nice to get that midweek win. You know, with Locomotive bouncing back from the disappointment against Pittsburgh. And before we get into like the actual, you know, we obviously have a lot to talk about today, but the for a midweek, like this was a really nice atmosphere, really nice turnout for Locomotive. This is a solid showing from El Paso on a Wednesday night.
Dude, I think we've spoken about it before that, like the home form is very good, and so that is just like it begets really good atmosphere. Yeah, it was really, really good last night. Decently full, decently busy. Section 105 was jumping for the 90 minutes, 90 plus like 6 or 7 minutes, even though there should have only been 4. But it was a really good atmosphere, and we definitely noticed up in the press box too. We were talking about it, and that's credit to the fans, obviously. And it doesn't hurt that the club was giving out some really fly T-shirts. I did not get to snag one, but those Vamos El Paso shirts are super nice.
Yeah.
So if you're one of the lucky 1,500, then congratulations.
We lucky few. I think, and maybe you know, credit due to the club in terms of the timing of those sorts of giveaways to maximize a midweek attendance, but. Like you said, home form's been good, and so we're here midweek to talk about Locomotive's win against Sacramento Republic FC 1-0 last night, Wednesday night. Before we get into it, if you are finding us for the first time, we're Seriously Loco, and you can find us at Seriously Loco on Twitter, at Seriously_Loco on Instagram, and you can find us on most social media platforms, Facebook, Twitch, everything in between, but we're also on Patreon, patreon.com/SRSLY Loco. And on Patreon right now, Mika, you've got a piece that just went up today, or wait, yesterday? Today. Yeah, whatever. What is time? About Locomotive's newest acquisition, Liam Rose. And I thought this, a good shout out for a good piece. But talking about this Liam Rose acquisition more broadly, Locomotive do sign some extra help in midfield or potentially wide defense, depending on how we're thinking about things. But Liam Rose, a midfielder from Australia. Mika, what did you find out about Liam in researching this piece, and what can Locomotive fans expect to see from him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the club's first mid-season, if you can call it mid-season acquisition of 2022. Obviously John Hutchinson and the staff are looking to augment the squad because we've got a lot of injuries and various issues with that. So, yeah, Liam comes in and like you said, a midfielder who can maybe play other roles as well. But primarily what I can tell is that he is a defensive midfielder and looks to be the depth for Richie Ryan that we've all been crying out for. And so I think he'll slot in there nicely. But yeah, I mean, Liam seems like a really interesting player, interesting background, obviously from Australia. So John's compatriot, and actually they were teammates at Central Coast Mariners all those years ago, played 4 matches together actually, and then obviously John went to work with Mariners straight away after he retired, and so he coached Liam for another year after that. So they are, acutely familiar with one another, and it's cool to see that John is using those connections to help Locomotive. And I think he will do, because yeah, he's been playing at the top level in Australian football in the A League, most recently for MacArthur FC. I mean, granted, mostly a bench player, a role player, if you will, this season. But I mean, he's done pretty well in his limited minutes. And the good thing is, and I point this out in the piece too, never mind the tactical and the technical, it's just nice to have someone who's going to be match fit, you'd think. Because that was a struggle for us in the beginning of the season with all the new signings we made. But, A-League is just ending as of like a week and a half ago, the regular season ended. They're into the playoffs now. So theoretically, he should be fit. And like Christian found out last night, they are, keeping him trained and stuff. John's got connections in Australia that he's utilizing to make sure Liam's all ready to go. We're just waiting on paperwork at this point. So, yeah, it's exciting. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly he gets used, I guess.
Yeah, that connection is obviously interesting, and I think important to point out, along with a lot of Hutch's signings so far, Liam, despite having made his professional debut for Central Coast Mariners in 2014, he's only 25. So he's been playing at a professional level for quite a long time, and so he's made his way kind of around the world. He's played in Armenia before, and tried to expand his horizons, and but yeah, he's been playing quite a lot in the A-League, and I think there were maybe some questions as to like whether his development had maybe stalled because he's featured at youth level for Australia and all those things, and I think maybe they were thinking things had maybe stalled out a little bit as MacArthur did send him on loan this past season, but he still made 32 appearances for MacArthur prior to that loan deal. So I mean, he's not totally a fringe player, I guess, in terms of his quality, and I think we've often said on this show since the beginning of the season that midfield is an area where we thought there was room for additional depth and additional quality. So it's not shocking that Hutch has dipped into the transfer market for some additional help in midfield to give us maybe some different looks and some different balance to the midfield depending on the opponent.
Definitely, yeah, and he, even though he is going to be, if you will, on the depth chart behind Richie Ryan, they are very different players, and shameless plug, but I would encourage everyone read the Patreon piece because I kind of delve into what makes them different, and even compare them to like Calvillo and guys like that. So, yeah, I'm hopeful about the acquisition, and like you said, he has played elsewhere, like in Armenia. So the thought I would have is that he'll hopefully settle pretty quickly because he's used to going abroad to play and ply his trade. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing him come through and come play for Locomotive.
I would certainly recommend reading the piece as well. Mika's put quite a bit of work into making the GIFs functional in Patreon.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be a challenge. So that alone, in terms of, and I mean, along with the other pieces that have gone up, this I think we get a pretty good look at a lot of these folks who otherwise, and I mean, Y Scout is kind of a crazy tool that like we get to see these players who we otherwise may not have the opportunity to see. So yeah, definitely check it out. Unless you want to get a Y Scout subscription, which trust me, it's not. I would say our Patreon is way more cost effective, is what I'll say.
Big time, yeah, man. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check that out on our Patreon, patreon.com/seriouslyloco. And for for those who are interested in, staying on the podcast and keeping up with the podcast, you can find us on any major podcast platform. And if that platform allows you to rate and review, it would be really cool if you did, because more Locomotive fans are going to see it. If there's more reviews and if you guys are enjoying. So anyways, we thank you all. For all those who are subscribed to the Patreon, thank you so much for your support, and thank you to those who have left a rate and review on any podcast platform, because it means more people get to listen to the podcast, which is cool. The Seriously Loco match review. Well, Mika, El Paso Locomotive 1, Sacramento Republic 0. Few talking points through this one, but it seems that the overall takeaway from this match is this is kind of the cliche of when a good team is faced with a team that's, hunkered down and really trying to frustrate them, and maybe Sacramento, a little bit content to potentially draw, good teams find a way to win, however that is.
Yeah, it's winning ugly, as they say. And ugly it was. What we saw on the pitch contrasts quite heavily with how the atmosphere was, because the atmosphere was definitely the better part. The football was not anything to write home about. We certainly tried our hardest to break through, but Sacramento came out in this honestly surprising 5-4-1 off the ball, and they were off the ball quite a lot.
Yeah.
To be fair, and I'm surprised. Maybe I'm a bit ignorant because I don't watch Sacramento week in, week out, but I was surprised at how negative they played. And yeah, it was frustrating, but I'm glad that they didn't get to really profit from it, because at the end of the day, we were able to get the job done. And I think we haven't seen a result like this quite yet. This is probably the first time that we've seen the Locomotive really battle for the 3 points. It seems like in previous fixtures, everything has kind of had to go our way, and we'd have to play the glittering attacking football that we're used to. But this one, we definitely fought and scrapped for 3 points, despite Sacramento's, again, negativity and the physical approach, the kicking that was going on.
Yeah.
It was pretty surprising. I just don't remember Sacramento being that kind of team, but maybe I'm just out of the loop on them. But yeah, I'm glad that we were able to come away with all 3 points.
Yeah, I totally think, you pointing out that this isn't the type of game that Locomotive have been able to win so far. I think the only game that I can think of that was similar to this was Oakland Roots. And obviously, early concession of a set piece and then kind of a, quick fire reply leads to a 1-1 draw. This one felt like a little bit of a level up from Locomotive in terms of their defensive approach. And this was even with a pretty significant shakeup on the back line. And talking about the lineup for this one, in retrospect, clean sheet, but at the start, Matt Boehner pairing Yuma in central defense and Andrew Fox on the bench, getting what I would say is a well-deserved rest. But each of the players who started in Locomotive's back line acquitted themselves really well across the 90 minutes.
Yeah, we were joking up in the press box that, we're joking, but we're also very serious, that Matt Boehner was our best player. Anytime Matt comes into the side, it's just solid. A solid, 7 out of 10, pretty much every time he appears, it feels like. And that's very valuable to have in a squad. And Matt's been really good, and his defending style is very, simple, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you need sometimes. So yeah, I mean, he acquitted himself well. Yuma, of course, I'm sure we'll get on to him. I thought he was very good as well, moving the ball. It seems like he is also able to adjust to different partners, which is nice. Because like you said, Foxy starting on the bench for a while, we felt like maybe Yuma couldn't function without Chiro and Toko, and I think that those fears have been allayed. So yeah, the back line was very good. Um, Chapa starts it right back, and that
Hmm.
was really exciting. Unfortunately, it ends in misery for him and for the fans, I think. And then Borelli, of course, his usual reliable self. Although I think he got pinned back a lot. Didn't really get to do the bombing on that he likes because Sacramento really played five at the back. So, but yeah, defensively it was pretty good, and you can't really complain about a clean sheet. So
Yeah. Much more, yeah. I think we saw much more from Borelli in the second half in terms of
yeah,
being able to get into some space, and we'll definitely get on to some of the changes and things that happened throughout the game that maybe freed that up. But in terms of the starting lineup, we did see the return of Diego Luna partnering Dylan Maris either side of Eric Calvillo in the six. Not a banner night for either of our attacking mids, though. I think Sacramento able throughout the 90 to really frustrate. And I think it became quite clear pretty early on that they were targeting Diego, both in terms of the amount of players marking him at any given time, and Luis Felipe and Rodrigo Lopez seemed to have the mission of kick him if he's trying to go past you.
yeah. Diego took a beating. Blonde Diego, as it were. New look for the 18-year-old. Yeah, it wasn't a better night for him, like you said. I think that he was marked out of the game, outnumbered a lot. There'd be times where he'd get on the ball and have to try and beat 3-4 people with like a jinking run, and it just wasn't coming off for him. I mean, the kid's amazing, but he is also a human being, and yeah, they definitely game planned for him. On the Dylan Mara's side of life, Dylan has looked a bit jaded to me in recent fixtures, and I don't know if that is fatigue, if that's just a natural like ebb and flow of form, if it's a mixture of all those things, if it's something else entirely. I just feel like he is not passing the ball with the accuracy and the crispness that we've come to expect. And especially against Sacramento, I felt that he was really crowded out, and a lot of the passing lanes that he likes were not available, or as clearly available, maybe. And there were some times that he played some passes that were just like really like super. I don't even know, like just straight in a way that like I don't know how to say it, but it's just like it was easy to cut them out. It was easy to create danger and counterattacks out of them for Sacramento, and so yeah, neither of them I think will think that this was a great appearance, but and then Calvillo as well. He was all right. I mean, again, I'm just not convinced by him in the like sole pivot position. So that midfield, like I don't know if it was ever gonna be super functional when you've got. I mean, really a midfield four with Douglas Martinez dropping to really make it five and pin them all in. They just didn't really have a good time, and a lot of the play was, you know, subjected to the wide areas.
The attack, unfortunately, not much to write home about because it was, as we said, super defensive performance from Sacramento, and I think each of the attackers, while there were those kind of like nearly moments or those moments where maybe something would come together, there was a lot of frustration, I would say, for not in terms of their reaction, but in terms of just inability to create like those really clear cut chances that we'd expect from this team, especially with the high flying that they've done. So unfortunately the attack doesn't get as much of the conversation. As the first half kind of like ticked on in this one, there was a lot, as you said, like it almost felt like the midfield was where things were just kind of getting like gummed up. And that was really where it felt like we were just unable to like make that next progression kind of into the penalty area or in and around the penalty area. And yeah, unfortunately, the attack comes away from this one with really nothing to show for it, as the lone goal comes from a less likely source.
Yeah, and I think if there's anyone that can be like somewhat praised in the attack, it is Cristiano Francois, because I think he tried his very best to get beyond that back five, and he did successfully isolate his opposite man a couple of times. Lacroix, actually, who was sensational. I mean, like, he was absolutely, like, it was a really intriguing one-on-one battle last night between Cristiano and Lacroix. Like, they just really went at it and gave each other a good game. And Lacroix, I think he thwarted a lot of cutbacks that were on a couple crosses, or he would just knock the ball out, or catch up to Francois, which is, I mean, the guy's name is Cheetah, for Christ's sake. Like, that takes a special player to keep up with him. So yeah, even in those one-on-one battles, like, we just weren't having that much joy as much as Cristiano tried. And then on the opposite flank, I think Gomez kind of got lost in the game a little bit. He wasn't terrible, but there was a point where I forgot that he was on the pitch, which is not usual. And not to make excuses, but you got to wonder. I mean, the guys, apparently they left Pittsburgh at 3 a.m. the morning after the game. So it's like, and then spending that whole day traveling, getting delayed in Chicago, which, of course,
as you do.
Like, Chicago O'Hare, that's Chicago O'Hare heritage. You would know, Phil.
As you do. Yeah.
So, I mean, a long day of traveling, and straight to training, actually, the next day. Mostly video work.
Sure.
But the guys are working really hard, and these 3-match weeks are tough. So I think winning ugly is probably more than we can ask for, if I'm being honest.
And that is the thing, is like, there are always going to be games like this where you're not at your free-flowing best, especially given the travel and all those things. And, like, let's not forget, they played an intense 90 minutes against Pittsburgh, where, that isn't, there was really only Diego of the players that typically feature in the squad. Like, only Diego got a true rest in terms of not traveling. And yeah, it's just, I mean, it can be brutal. And I think them turning around and going west, I would say, is maybe a little bit easier than these like long East Coast trips. And so I think they'll be thankful that they're headed to California this weekend rather than back out east. But yeah, you mentioned Francois. And I mean, it was crazy between him and Duke Lacroix. It was like, with the French last names, I mean, it felt like watching like a fencing duel. It was like the Three
Formula
Musketeers,
1,
like
every Paso Grand Prix. Three Musketeers, yes.
Like every thrust and strike from Francois was just being parried and riposte and whatever, like all the, and it was a, as you said, like a fascinating duel, but unfortunately Cristiano not able to find that breakthrough against him. But so the first half is wearing on, and I mean, there's these like nearly moments for Locomotive. There's a handful of moments where it almost felt like the half was happening in segments, where each team was kind of taking turns, like being in the ascendancy, or there were a couple of times where a handful of minutes. I want to be really clear, not like not large swaths of the first half, but there were a few minutes of the first half where it felt like we were having a little bit of trouble breaking out, and it felt like Sacramento was getting into like dangerous areas. They weren't able to create anything truly dangerous, which was the upside. But as the first half wears on, 41st minute, Chapa Herrera's like tracking a run in behind down that right flank in that right back position, sticks a leg out to try to make a block, overextends himself, and goes down with a non-contact injury. And in that moment, it seemed very serious because Chapa was obviously distraught, in a lot of pain. And it turns out that, unfortunately, like, our worst fears are true, in the aftermath of that injury.
Yeah, it's become clear that he will miss likely the rest of the season with an anterior cruciate ligament injury of the left knee, I think it is, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the right knee is what he recently had on operation on. But still, I mean, that is a really, really tough injury for a footballer, for anyone, but especially for a footballer to come back from. And obviously, we just want him healthy. It was gutting to see him walk off like that, and I know the fans are upset about it too, because he's a fan favorite. He's the El Paso boy, and Christian was attending the press conference on behalf of Seriously Local last night, and he said that, he was sitting in the room with John Hutchinson, and he was tearing up talking about it. I mean, this is a major part of the dressing room, a beloved figure in the dressing room and among the fans, and it's just gutting because Chapa has really, I mean, he's kind of been the bridge between like the Mark Lowry era in a way and this Hutchinson era, one of the original players, adapting to new things that are being asked of him, which, I mean, now that I think about it, you kind of wonder, like, playing in that fullback position, was he doing something with his body that maybe he's not used to? I don't know. I think the pitch just absolutely betrays him in that moment.
Yeah.
And he just slips awkwardly, catches himself awkwardly. But yeah, it's just terrible, and I hope that the recovery will be swift and as comfortable as it can be. But yeah, I mean, the injury bug is just brutal. We're getting absolutely battered this season, and it's really just unlucky.
Yeah. Like you said, that moment for Chapa, it's absolutely gutting, and we just hope that he's able to focus on the recovery and come back. The thing about Chapa, more broadly, I guess, is, as you said, like, he has acted like a little bit of a bridge, but when I think back to, the initial signing and all those things, it was almost like it just felt like he's like this local story that kind of connects, like, along with Omar, just kind of acting as this, like, this is the connection to the community, and like, he's kind of making up the numbers sort of thing, like, doesn't play all that often, and like, his game has grown so significantly, and I think you can say this of a handful of players that we've seen grow with Locomotive, but Chapa is maybe the starkest example in terms of, like, he went from being this kind of like bit player, nice story, to like, he is a serious footballer, and he belongs in this group, and more than that, like, belongs as a significant piece of it. So this is a huge blow. And I think you can see, for someone who is brand new to the organization in terms of John Hutchinson, he's not been around for, the feel good aspect of Chapa's story. It's just, this is a player that he sees, the utmost sort of like effort and ability in. And so, yeah, it's devastating we've seen it, unfortunately, happen to, a handful of significant players at Locomotive, and I just hope that he can recover and come back, and this isn't, I don't think it's the last we've seen of Chapa in a Locomotive jersey. It's just he'll definitely have the fans' full support through his recovery, and we hope to see him back very, very soon. It goes into halftime 0-0, And after the break, same kind of deal. It's not really, the situation's not really changing. And if anything, Sacramento are starting to almost feel more defensive in that as the second half starts to wear on into the, 50, 60, it's like they can start to smell that point and they're hunkering down even more so than what they did in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, look no further than Vitiello wasting time at every opportunity. Just I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go as far as to like call it a disgrace, but it is like what a mentality that is. I mean, yeah, taking forever with the goal kicks and just making the most of it. But yeah, it really did feel like they were dropping even deeper. But I mean, these kind of scenarios, again, this is the first time we're seeing it in like an ugly attritional game, if you will, very very agrarian kind of game. But I mean, Hutch does what he's kind of like becoming known for with the substitutes. Yeah, a handful of subs. I mean, he's forced into obviously the Siobhan John Brown change for Chapa right there at the end of the first half, which Siobhan, I think, we've talked about him on this podcast and being a quality option, really in any position because he is so versatile. Again, acquits himself very well in this performance. In my opinion, I thought he was really good after he came on. But we also saw the introduction of Richie Ryan into that midfield, which this is maybe going to be the unsung of the changes, but there was something about Richie being introduced to this game that added a layer of control to Locomotive. No, for sure. Yeah, another conversation that we had amongst us journalists is like the difference in quality when Richie Ryan is on the pitch, anchoring that midfield is really apparent. And that's no slight to Eric Calvillo, obviously. It's just that we're able to hold the ball a little bit better, and Richie will drop it exactly where it needs to go.
Yeah.
At first time, more often than not. So even Sacramento couldn't gum up that kind of quality. And yeah, I think it was an understated performance, but a good one nonetheless from Richie. And he didn't have to, exert all of his energy over the full 90 minutes. I thought it was astute management as well from John Hutchinson and his staff, because Richie is, 37 years old. So we need to think about those things. But yeah, I mean, he allowed us to at least keep the ball in their half and start drawing some fouls, drawing some corners, and eventually I think that's ultimately what tells is a corner.
It is, and before that corner was taken in the 66th minute, a somewhat surprising substitution is made in Andrew Fox is brought on not for Matt Boehner, not for Eder Borelli, but for Cristiano Francois.
We went 4-4-2 with Andrew as a left midfielder because Borelli stayed on.
Yeah.
He became a wide player, like a winger.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It worked a treat. It was, yeah, and we have seen Andrew Fox in a variety of roles, primarily across the back line, but we've also seen him employed as a striker. In season 1, he made a couple of appearances up top when
oh my God, I
Locomotive
were like absolutely desperate, so
short of options. I remember a particular match. I think it was a 3-1 loss to San Antonio at home that he started up top, but we see Andrew come in this role where it is maybe a little bit unfamiliar, but very akin to how he plays as a left back. But it was more so his involvement in set pieces, and specifically something you called out during the game. His involvement, he is just always popping up at the back post.
Yeah, I mean, I did call it out, but I'm sure it doesn't take any rocket science because we kept spamming it to the far post, and I said out loud, like, why are we doing this when Andrew Fox is not on the pitch? That is his bread and butter, you know. No one's getting to that but him. And once he does come on, a corner gets whipped in swinger to the far post. He gets a boot to it first, and
Yeah.
Vitiello makes an incredible save, to be fair to him. I don't know that he knew too much about it, but he does get in the way of it. But then the rebound is smashed home by Andrew Fox, and pandemonium in the swap on a Wednesday night. And I mean, the guy's just clutch, absolutely clutch. Scores really, really big goals for us. I think of that goal. I think of the Rico goal,
The
of
Rico
course.
goal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Foxy's really becoming a legend here.
Yeah, I think Fox. I think I will say Vitiello gets a cross, but I do think the ball is over the line in the initial touch.
You think so?
Having
Okay.
watched it on the broadcast, I really do think it goes in, and Vitiello does make a valiant effort. But either way, Foxy's making no mistake and just absolutely hammers it in from about 2 yards out on the rebound. But yeah, I guess this is the thing, because obviously huge moment, the winning goal, all those things. But when you are short of ideas, or when what you're doing against a team that is sent out to frustrate your style of attack, when it's not working, like, you just have to find that other route. And yeah, a corner hit to the back post, more often than not, Andrew Fox is finding his way there. He always makes that far post run. And whether it's with his head, whether it's on the volley as it is this time, like, he always seems to get himself into those areas and cause problems. And I don't know if that's why John sent him on, in terms of, like, I'm going to make this sub and make us more of a threat from set pieces. But I wouldn't be shocked if that was the thought, because there's really no logical reason. The obvious change to make, if you're going to bring off Francois, the obvious replacement is Ricardo Zacharias. Like,
Yeah.
that's just kind of the like for like, and it's a winger for a winger, or, an attacker for attacker, however you want to think about it. Foxy is not the obvious change by any stretch of the imagination. And you have to think that at a certain level, it's like, where does Foxy, like, most pop up? We know he's got a good delivery with his left foot, so that could have been part of the thinking, in terms of, like, maybe giving Lucho some extra opportunities from crosses, that sort of stuff. But he always puts himself about on set pieces, and once again, it's worked to devastating effect for Locomotive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wonder if we're being a little unfair on Fox, and, like, not unfair, but, like, surprised when he puts the ball in the net, because he was extremely prolific for St. Ed's, for
Yeah.
the Hilltoppers. 36 goals and, like, 60 something appearances. So I mean, it's not like a foreign concept to him. Of course, we're talking about levels here between NCAA and professional football, but I mean, yeah, what more can you say? I mean, we just needed that moment so badly. And credit to John Hutchinson again, like, making a change that on the face was like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Works a treat. He gets it right. We get the goal, and then we hang on from there.
Well, and in the moments after the goal, there were a handful. Well, I say handful, that's maybe being a bit generous, but there were a couple of really good chances to make it 2-0.
Yeah.
That Locomotive don't take. But in that period, and in and around that period, a certain Spaniard who just can't seem to keep himself out of the discourse is involved again. A long ball over the top by Sac Republic. Yuma is wrestling with Douglas Martinez, who we know has history with Locomotive from his days in the, in the Real Monarchs, Real Salt Lake, organization. But in his time with Real Monarchs, he was a bit of a shithouse, if we do say. And him and Yuma wrestling, Yuma certainly like bringing him down in this particular case and maybe deserving of the yellow card that he ends up getting. However, Douglas Martinez lashes out with a clearly thrown elbow, and catches Yuma clean. Like 100% a red card, nailed on, all those things. Despite all of that, despite the fact that it was a clearly thrown elbow, despite the fact that the red card is easy for the referee to give, he sees the elbow, all of those things. He rightly gives a red card. It still started a conversation online.
As it does. Yeah, the Yuma discourse is wild. I mean, the man, so divisive, I guess, because it feels like every time he does something controversial, like, us fans dig our heels in. We're like, nah, that's our captain. Like, screw it. And people just hate him more. Yeah, I mean, you basically laid out the scenario there pretty perfectly, I think. Yuma does hang on his back and, like, kind of, I mean, that's, I don't know what they call it, like a horse something like that, like in the NFL, where, like, that's a foul in the NFL even, like, hanging on to someone like that. I don't know, I could be completely wrong, but, yeah, like, you don't put your arms around someone like that. It is a foul, but the way that Douglas Martinez reacts is, I mean, quite him, I guess. Like, I don't know. He's got that in his locker, and he totally, I mean, he elbows the crap out of Yuma. I don't know what to say. It's yeah, and Yuma puts himself about, it's not that he's always doing something ridiculous. I mean, we've already talked about the dive that got the man sent off versus Tulsa, but also like in Pittsburgh, he got absolutely clattered by the goalkeeper. That is the right call. This, where he gets elbowed, is the right call, and I think he does see yellow.
He does,
as well. So, I mean, I thought that was refereed correctly. I've seen some call for double red, but I don't think so. I think he definitely commits a foul, but the retaliation is like straight violence. Yeah. So, I mean, he's got to go. So,
yeah.
I mean,
it's not it. I
clever,
think,
I guess, but you have to control yourself in those situations and not get riled up. But he was just good at getting these reactions out of people, I guess.
Yeah, and I think like at the end of the day, you just have to recognize like what is like. Yeah, there's going to be these moments. Yuma is that type of player who he is going to use like a bit of a psychological advantage, and if he can get in a player's head and cause them to react or anything like that, then he's gonna try to like gain that edge. And in this case, hanging on the back of Douglas Martinez from a ball over the top, he's 60, 70 yards from goal. It's not a red. Like, it's not a denial of a goal scoring opportunity. Like, that is assuming so many things when you're standing on the halfway line. But him hanging on the back of Douglas Martinez, like, absolutely should not result in him getting the shit elbowed out of him. Like, that's not it's just not a proportionate response. And Douglas Martinez like we said, he's been in these situations before. He's shown like that he doesn't necessarily like handle his frustration well. And in this one, he was frustrated for much of the game. The conversation around Yuma for me, like, takes on a whole different level after the red card, because Yuma makes some unbelievable interventions in defense late on in this one in particular. Throughout the game, he played really well, I thought, but particularly in the last 10 minutes, it felt like he was involved in so many of these just like great tackles on the edge of the area and all these things. Like
that slide tackle. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he has this way of I can understand that he's a mildly controversial figure, but in this one, for my money, does little wrong and actually is just puts in a really significant and an important shift defensively.
Definitely. And for the people that are like screaming at their car stereos because I didn't know what the term was, it's a horse collar tackle. That is a personal foul in football when you grab the back of the collar. So that's what I was thinking of. I knew it was something. But, I mean, that's kind of like what Yuma did there. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this discourse that I find a little bit like frustrating at times is that he is a very good footballer.
Yeah.
And I think even like, and this is no like shade to anyone in particular, and we've fallen into it, I'm sure, at times, but like it's not diminishes, but I mean it just like overshadows that he is a very good footballer, very experienced, technically very savvy, a good passer, like a pro, has played for years, like years and years and years, and is a very good player, who just so happens to like be really good at provoking the opposition, and yes, every now and then committing some shithousery himself. So, but I mean, he puts himself about, and that's why he gets into these situations. And Douglas Martinez, I mean, at the end of the day, like he has to look at himself, and how he let down the team. And I think with a talent like that, like he is a talented striker, but I mean, at what cost, right? Because you never know if he's going to do something like that. And I guess that's just the risk that you take. I don't know if a player like that would ever be signed by John Hutchinson, let's put it that way. So
yeah, I mean, this was a guy who in that run to the final and in Real Monarchs ultimately winning the USL Cup in 2019, like he was very much, along with David Ochoa, like very much talked about as, Real Salt Lake's like next big thing. And I can't say that attitude and like these sorts of things aren't part of the reason that he's not plying his trade in MLS right now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I mean,
just looking at the discipline record, I mean, 16 yellows, 2 reds. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. That's a
for
lot.
A striker.
For a forward, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like what even?
Well, in the house, it was revealed on Wednesday night to witness his old adversary Douglas Martinez be sent off was the one and only Omar Salgado, former Locomotive forward, and obviously El Paso connection. But in the house to witness his old foe see the early shower.
Beautiful scenes. I'm happy to hear that Omar was able to grace us with his presence because the man is a jet setter.
He's all over the place.
All over the place.
I feel like he was in Poland like 2 days ago.
Literally, unless he pulled like a #latergram, I thought he was there too. Like, but that's really cool because I think that the way that he left the club was like kind of under a shroud, a cloud, if that's the saying. So to see him back and like watching in the stands, that was really a cool moment. And some folks sent us pictures with him. So yeah, because I didn't believe it at first.
Yeah, and I mean rightfully so. The match ends, as we said, 1-0. There was, just a level of defensive solidity from Locomotive in that they allow 0 shots on target in addition to keeping the clean sheet. It did not stop the Locomotive faithful and I would say the team as well from having that heart and mouth moment as there was a little bit of a stoppage. Yuma was suffering some cramps. And so extra time went on, and Sac Republic actually fashioned quite a good chance right at the end of the game, the final kick of the game, and luckily dragged just wide. I believe it was Luther Archimede who dragged the shot wide, but extremely close. Almost felt like a little bit of karma in terms of Locomotive failing to convert from the penalty spot in Pittsburgh and steal a point. Similarly, Sac Republic unable to convert that late chance and definitely steal a point.
Definitely, yeah, that would have been a smash and grab of a point for sure. To be fair, we should definitely have grabbed something from the penalty spot. I think his chance was still a bit harder than that. It wasn't exactly 1xG, but yeah, the shout out to Joe at the striker, because when that chance happened, he goes, "Don't score. I already wrote my match report." So that's kind of, practically speaking, how it goes for those of us in the hashtag industry, as it were.
Yeah.
It's like those late drama moments are great if you're just watching the game, but if you're working the game, it's quite something else, because then we got to change what's going to happen at the press conference, what we're going to write about, what we're going to talk about, all of this. So, but at the end of the day, Evan Newton keeps his third clean sheet, and you love to see it.
Yeah, and we didn't mention Evan Newton, which is a testament to the fact that he doesn't have to make a save all game, but in terms of his goalkeeping more generally and the sweeping up, that obviously that was a big part of the discourse. He seems he's found his feet in terms of that partnership with the back line and making those decisions about when to come and when to stay on his line.
Yeah, there was one shaky moment between him and Yuma where Yuma was kind of like shepherding the ball back to him, but I think Yuma misjudged how far back the box was and he couldn't grab it right away. But other than that, though, it was really, really good sweeping from him. I saw someone make a Manuel Neuer meme of him, so I mean that just shows you what the fans thought. Some of his passes, like he was lobbing it over Douglas Martinez's head, which I'm sure only served to piss him off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good from Evan. He looks much more comfortable now. And I mean, I would like 3 clean sheets is great, especially when you consider how we started. But if we can do that on the road, that would be nice. I think that's the next step in kind of the trajectory, if you will.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And a big opportunity coming up for a result on the road. So Locomotive come away from this one against a Northern California team 1-0. They're headed to Southern California on Saturday to take on Orange County, and we'll take a quick break and we'll be back to preview that. The Seriously Loco match preview. Welcome back to Seriously Loco. Mika, we've got Orange County on Saturday in Orange County, which not been the happiest hunting ground for Locomotive. A lot of draws, feels like. And Orange County coming into this one, having just absolutely destroyed Tulsa this past weekend, and no midweek game for Orange County. So how are we feeling about going into this game against OC?
Yeah, it'll be tough. Like you said, not been the greatest time out at Championship Soccer Stadium, I think it's called. I think we played out a 2-2 draw last time with goals from Carijo and Nick Ross. So obviously we don't have those guys to call upon again. So we'll have to make some new memories out there in Orange County. But yeah, it's hard to... I mean, I just feel like there's some championship hangover with this Orange County side. I mean, obviously they put a beating on Tulsa, like you said, but otherwise been kind of meh. Like 3-3-3 is their record, 15 goals for, 13 goals against, and actually I wanted to look at some of the context of those numbers, and they are overperforming in the attack. Scored 15 goals from an XG of just 9.57.
Oh,
So
wow.
it tells me if Milan Alaski loses his shooting boots, then they could be in a world of trouble, because the defense appears to be struggling as well. They've conceded 13 goals from an expected goals against of 8.27.
Wow.
So, yeah, this Orange County side, like I think Milan Alaski is papering over some cracks there with his 5 goals and 1 assist, and I mean Eric Torres as well is also doing bits, but yeah, I don't know what to make of them. I mean, some days are really on it, and some days not so much, and you got to think that. I mean, we saw that with Real Monarchs. I think when after they won the title, they were just kind of like terrible after that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying Orange County are terrible, but I mean there is, I think, something to that, having to play all that soccer when others got knocked out earlier. So weird team, and I don't really know what to make of it or how we necessarily match up.
Yeah. I mean, 3 wins in 10. Or well, I guess 3 wins this season. 2 of those wins against a decidedly subpar RGV side. Draws against New Mexico, a loss against San Antonio, draw Sac Republic, loss to Indy, drew Oakland Roots, and then obviously this big win against Tulsa, which caught, I would say, everybody by pretty significant surprise. A hat trick from Milan Alaski in that one. So his 5 goals on the season, more than half of them came in their last match.
In that game, yeah.
So yeah, it's just it is a weird one for sure, and it just feels like this Orange County team, they, like you said, they've conceded more goals than they would be expected to, but they've also scored more goals than they'd be expected to, and they thrived last season on, first and foremost, like defensive solidity that gave them the platform to play this counterattacking style. And to be fair to them, they are living in the post Ronaldo Damas era. So this is, this is a team missing a significant piece of that attack, as he, has since moved on. But yeah, there's not a result this season for this Orange County side that I look at and say, this is something that they can build on, or something that they can, this Tulsa result could be that for them, but it almost feels so farcical and so over the top that it just, many teams could just like chalk it up to an anomaly and maybe not think anything of it for Orange County.
Yeah, I mean, they had 9 shots on target against Tulsa, and 5 of those go in. Like, I don't think that's something you can rely on to happen week in, week out, obviously. So, yeah, it's impressive because, like I said previously, I think Tulsa is underperforming given the tools they have at their disposal. But, yeah, I mean, the one thing that does give me pause, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, is that they do play like a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. And again, like we saw on the road to Pittsburgh, we really didn't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Except for Yuma getting punched in the head to give us a penalty in the dying embers, which we could not convert. So again, I mean, we're going out to California and likely going to face that system that we haven't had an answer for yet. So I'm hoping Eric Calvillo will help us scout a little bit his former side.
Yeah.
And we can come up with some answers, because yeah, I think even so, like tactically it might still be a battle, even though we find ourselves, I think, in a better vein of form, the Pittsburgh result notwithstanding.
I did want to give a shout out. I was invited on the Orange and Black Soccer Cast, which is
yes.
Orange County's main podcast, and those guys put on a great show. It is if you're interested in learning more about the opposition, certainly check out the Orange and Black Soccer Cast. You can find them, wherever you find podcasts. It was funny how the discussion was shaped quite a bit by Locomotive's kind of early season form, and I found myself talking, quite broadly about Locomotive, whereas, if we zoom in to the last, 5-6 games, well, I guess even 7 games, we're looking at, a loss like in that time. So, right. Mentally for me as a Locomotive fan, like experiencing the team game by game, I'm feeling really optimistic about where we are. And it was really interesting to field questions and be asked certain things that definitely were like, hey, how are you guys like coping with having such a shitty season? And I was like, hey, that's kind of like in the rear view now. Like, that's not really the team. And I'm not saying that, we can totally forget the form that Locomotive had so early on, but it was interesting to have the conversation from a place of like, we are zoomed out just kind of looking at records and, they were, top of the, like one of the top teams in the West last season. So like, hey, you guys have fallen quite far. Not really the story, like for the Locomotive fan who is, experiencing each game. And with this vein of form that we're in, not really. I mean, I hope this is how opposing teams are thinking about us. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case, and I don't think Orange County will, rely too much on that early season form to prepare for this one.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I mean, it's kind of like what I said about Sacramento earlier, is my surprise at the way that they approach the game, because we're not watching these teams week in, week out, same way people aren't watching us. So yeah, I would have been like floored too if someone was like, how are you dealing with this like terrible season? It's like, it's actually been pretty good lately. Like
they were like surprised at some of the answers of being like, but your tone is very positive. Like, why is that?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, just different perspectives and not paying attention to one another's teams as closely. And the table doesn't really, there's not as much context there, right? And so, that's funny. They're like, why are you happy? Like, what? Yeah. You should be miserable right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, contrast that, like fans who we don't always know the exact context around each other's clubs. I think players are a little bit different though, because Rodrigo Lopez, for example, like he tweeted on the day of the match, like, we're off to play one of the best teams in USL. And it's like, players know.
Yeah.
Which means that their coaches must know and know what quality is out there, even if the fans of these clubs are not watching each other's teams week in, week out. So I just thought that was interesting. Is like, the reputation of Locomotive is still, firmly of a high quality among people who actually have to come up against us on the pitch. So I don't think Orange County will be taking anything for granted. But yeah, I hope we can find an answer to this 3 at the back, because it seems to be like a blueprint against us almost.
What is the, I mean, obviously if it were simple enough that we could figure out the way to unlock this sort of defense, I'm sure Hutch would have figured it out. But heading into this one, like, what do you think is the key to try to unlock this system and the way that they've been setting up against us?
So, look, I'm not going to say that I have all the answers, because I certainly don't. I know that the coaches, they have like drone footage, all these things that they can look at. But one thing that I wanted to see more of against Sacramento, and we didn't really see it until like kind of towards the end when we had someone to aim at, is more crossing. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, it's like Pep Guardiola always says, if someone is like bunkering against you, cross. Like,
yeah.
And sometimes you do need to just create a little bit of chaos, create a little bit of uncertainty in the area, make them work, and see what happens. And when we would cross it, like, no one was against Sacramento. I felt like we weren't attacking the ball. Like Lucho Solaniak was watching the ball sail in. It's like, no, attack that ball.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what Foxy does when balls come in like that. So I think we need to up our aerial game a little bit. And I mean, I guess we're coming full circle because our new signing, Liam Rose, is quite good in the air, more in a defensive sense, but I wonder if he can become a target for us if we get free kicks or, let him bomb on if he ever plays fullback for us or something like that. So I think we just have to vary up, our attacks more generally and maybe think about crossing it more rather than playing it down the line because, I mean, that's easy to gum up when you've got 3 that can easily become a 5, like we saw against Sacramento, like we saw against Pittsburgh, like we saw against San Diego and the like. So I don't know if that's too simplistic or what. I'm curious what you think about it, though, Phil. Like, what's the answer to this, like, terrorismo tactics that we keep coming up against?
Well, I mean, I think teams... It is really reminiscent of, you mentioned Guardiola, and it was funny. I got a little bit of stick on the Orange and Black Soccer Cast from the chat. They do it live, they do a live show, so I got a little bit of stick from the chat because I in trying to explain, Locomotive's tactics, I brought up the fact, and it wasn't lost on me, that Orange County have a partnership with Rangers. So I brought up Ange Postecoglou, but I said, if you're looking for an analog, like in terms of, something to reference, it really is reminiscent of Pep Guardiola's, like, Man City in terms of the approach, high intensity pressure, fullbacks, moving into central areas, like all these sorts of tactical innovations that Postecoglou has, made prevalent, and obviously John, in his time as Ange's assistant, picked up. So I got a little bit of stick from the chat because they were like, did he just say that Locomotive are like Manchester City? And I was like, I know there's level.
No.
Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, the style is,
yeah,
if you're looking for something like it to reference. But I think they need to take a page out of, like, those teams' book in terms of when a certain avenue is not working, because I think, like, we saw it various times in the Sacramento game, like the central midfielders trying to link up and trying to play these, like, kind of intricate sort of link ups through the center of the field. That wasn't necessarily working. So then we saw Diego, trying to, like, break lines by dribbling or whatever. And then we saw, all sorts of, like, different, they're trying to work out this problem in real time. I think they need to almost have a little bit more patience with each other in terms of, like, just if, rather than forcing a pass or trying to really, like, I'm going to make this, like, seeing eyeball, like, into the center of the defense, and all of a sudden there's 3 center backs standing, right there to cut it out and start a counter. I think they just need to exercise, like, that little bit of patience and saying, like, I'm not going to force this. Let's just keep the ball. Let's keep the pressure on. And, like, if we keep the ball and we keep changing the angle and we keep changing, like, that point of attack, eventually, like, there's going to be those, like, opportunities that present themselves. And then, I mean, a lot of weight is going to be placed on, like, a player making the right decision in the right moment and all that stuff that is, like, very cliche at this point. But there were a handful of times where I'm like, there's really no need to force it. Like, they're really, if they've got 11 players, and I'm not even exaggerating, if they have 11 players standing on the edge of the 18-yard box, like, it's not worth trying to force a pass into traffic and hope that someone can make a good turn or something like that. It's like, they're dropping so deep, like, just keep the ball circulating and keep things moving. And eventually someone is going to be able to make, like, that right decision to, whether it's a cross or whether it is, like, just changing the angle and saying, like, I'm going to play it back to the center back so that he can find the other fullback on the other side, and we're going to, like, change the point of attack, or whether I'm going to hit a big switch, whatever that sort of, like, just giving everybody that extra moment. Because how many times have we seen, not just from Locomotive, but I mean, just in football in general, where you feel that pressure building towards the goal, and it just kind of like naturally starts to lead to like corners and more opportunities, and eventually like that pressure just always seems to tell. And so I think what I was looking for maybe from Locomotive, and this will sound, it sounds weird when it's like, well, we were, you need to push and like go score a goal. It's like sometimes we were almost trying to do too much against a team that's bunkered so deep. And a lot of times, if you just keep that pressure up, and this is to your point with like putting crosses in, if you can keep that pressure up and make things difficult for them, a lot of times there will be that lapse of judgment or that mistake by a defender, and suddenly you're in.
I think, yeah, that's a really good point, is maybe just keeping a little bit of possession. Because I criticized a little bit, like, okay, we're playing like a horseshoe of death here. But
Yeah.
to your point, like, it does have a purpose. Because, yeah, the longer you make a defense concentrate, the harder it becomes, and somebody will make a mistake. Someone will lose their man. Somebody will forget to close a space, and then you're in. And with the quality of the players we have, like, I don't doubt that. So yeah, that is a good point. That sometimes the patience is necessary, and it can look a little bit. That's the thing, is it's striking the balance between like being patient in possession and being turgid, I guess. Like,
Right.
Yeah, because we saw that too.
And it is a fine line. It's a fine line for sure.
Yeah. Which is why I'm like, okay, every now and then, like, whip it in, because you want to do something a little that they're not expecting. They were expecting Francois to go down the line. They were expecting Gomez to press the fullback. They expect Lucho Soloniak to drop and try to lay it off quickly and then run in behind. So sometimes you got to vary up the attacking patterns. But yeah, no, definitely keeping the ball in certain phases of the play definitely does have, merit.
Well, to that point, and in terms of thinking through the selection that John has ahead of him this weekend, we know that Chapa will be an enforced change. I'd say it's likely that Andrew Fox, starts in the center of defense where we've seen him. Or, it's not impossible, I guess. Eder Borelli plays 90 minutes on Wednesday, so it's not impossible that we see a change at left back. But across the rest of the team, do you see many changes or any changes that you think may particularly crack this problem? Or do you think John more or less like persists? At least maybe in the attacking line, maybe there's a change or two in midfield.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to try to take Diego out of midfield and put him on the left, maybe, because I think Josué Aron Gomez had kind of I think the game passed him by a little bit, so I wonder if he could do with a little bit of rest, and Diego could maybe be closer to the goal and ask more questions of the Orange County defense. But I mean, the enforced changes you talked about and the kind of rotation with like Foxy coming in and all that, I think that is pretty much nailed on. I guess we'll just have to see, but yeah, I don't know. It's I would like to see Diego, I think, join the attacking line, but I don't know that I'd change too much else. Maybe Richie starting, I guess. He should be able to. I mean, he did play 45 minutes, so that's not nothing, but I think that level of quality on the road is very important. But again, we're going on the road, so that's fatiguing for the players. So, but I mean, I think what this highlights too is that with Liam coming in, with the comments that John Hutchinson made, is like we do definitely need reinforcements, because Seba Velasquez, Emmanuel Sanupe, now Chapa, like these injuries are really we've got at least three at any one time. Like we just got Martin Payares off the list, and now Chapa joins it. It's like just harsh, absolutely harsh.
The yeah, I think it's a decent shout with Diego moving up into the forward line, and then maybe Eric stays and starts, in the 8, with Richie slotting in that holding position. And I think, we've spoken quite a few times how we like the balance of that midfield, maybe a little bit more than the tends to be a quite unbalanced midfield when Luna and Maris are next to each other. And not to say, obviously, it adds a lot of attacking impetus, but I think Eric in that sort of box to box role could be big, and getting Josue a rest, because I do think part of, and not to make excuses on his behalf or anything like that, but I do think part of the reason that this game sort of does seem like it passes him by is because the man's been putting in absolute shifts for a while now, ever since he, really like forced his way back into the team. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's just a little bit tired after the run of games that he's had.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't envy John trying to balance all of these competing interests between wanting to win and putting out the best 11 out there, having all these injuries, and having players who may just be a little bit jaded right now. So, I mean, another comment that John did make is the academy, and they did have bringing in more academy players, and they did have an announcement today about youth soccer expanding for Locomotive. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. And I think Maldonado was on the bench against Sacramento. So
he was, yeah.
I mean, the kids might be all right. We'll have to see. We might have to rely on them a little bit. Yeah,
mention of no Coutinho as well, as Christian reported as well, like attending the press conference. There was mention of him and a likening of him to Josue Aron Gomez from John Hutchinson, which is an interesting little thing. So maybe hinting at how he sees, employing the youngster if needs be. On the roster news front, well, we can say that Siobhan John Brown will likely start at right back against Orange County. More to come on why it will definitely be him, but there's some news swirling around at the moment, and I'm sure the club will make an announcement shortly, but keep an eye out for that. But yeah, Siobhan likely the starter at the weekend.
Yep.
So, I guess with all that being said, lots of decisions to be made around the roster, and we know that this is a group of players that has played a lot of football. We're talking 7 games in like just shy of 3 weeks, basically. So, just a significant amount of football being played at the moment. And so a little bit of a selection dilemma, although I think Hutch, as he's managed his subs well, he's also managed the rotation quite well normally. But it'll be interesting to see how he approaches this one. With all that being said, coming up against this Orange County team, which has typically been a tough place to go, not a lot of joy in terms of wins for Locomotive. How do you see this one shaking out this weekend? And where do you think Locomotive end up? And if they grab any goals, who do you think gets them?
Yeah, it's tough. I think I'll back Lucho to score a goal for us in California. I'll go 1-1 draw. I do think it's going to be a little bit difficult, but we'll see. But yeah, Lucho to score.
I'm gonna go with a 2-1 win for Locomotive.
Okay.
I am saying that primarily based on the fact that, like, I think we have a little bit of a backup in terms of goals, goal scoring. And I think we, get that back on track slightly. I do think that it will be a pretty grinding game. I do think we're going to see the same type of just like staunch defending and definitely, counterattacking setup from Orange County. I do like the fact, I think we've dealt with those approaches far better than we had, over the opening few games. So I do like our chances to deal with it. But it has been tough going on the road for us. We've had these couple of like kind of breakout performances, but with all that being said, I think the improvements that we've seen in defense, along with a little bit of a return to goal scoring form for a couple of players, gets us back, and has us with a 6 out of 9 points for the week. I will say that with that move, maybe into the front line, I'll say Diego gets back on the score sheet. Diego Coin to the moon. I even said, I did say that Diego Coin was going to continue to be on the rise on the Orange and Black Soccer Cast, so I'll stick to that.
Nice.
Well, there you have it. Another big match for Locomotive on the weekend, and it's gonna be well, I don't know if we'll still have to see if we can put together the watch along. I unfortunately won't be able to be on the watch along, but I'm not sure. Maybe we can get you and Christian involved.
We'll see what we can do.
But if there is a watch along, it'll be on Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. So check out those sources for everything, and if you can participate from either Facebook or Twitch, then you can include, like, your chat comments are included as we go, and we always love interacting with the chat. It's what makes it enjoyable. Otherwise, it's just us talking, over the game, and which is enjoyable in its own right, but always fun to get the comments. And thanks to all who have joined in the past, and we look forward to adding even more in the future. As we head into this one, thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support. And if you want to hear more Seriously Local, you can find us on any of the major podcast platforms. And then you can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, as I said, Twitch, Facebook, and you can find us on Patreon. Make sure to check out Mika's piece on the newest Loco, Liam Rose, which is live now for patrons. So a couple of bucks a month gets you early access to those articles. It will be free for everybody in a couple of days. I'm assuming it probably goes,
I think probably like Saturday morning.
Unlocks like on game day. So definitely check that out. And we appreciate any support that you guys are willing to give. And thanks so much for being along for the ride. And Locomotive hopefully will stick to winning ways this weekend, and we'll all be watching with interest. But until then, stay loco.
Peace.